Hello everyone. Well, this is a fairly short presentation as a lot of the basic information is in the student guide and in the old lecture, which, as you can see, I recommend that you actually read the guide and watch the lecture. I just wanted to touch on a couple of points and give a different example of what the previous lecture had been talking about. So we'll have a quick pop over here. So I've got over here just the basics to look at, really. I just want to remind you what the maintenance costs actually are. So there are any financial expenditure costs that you have to undertake as an intervention on something, on a piece of equipment or material, to keep it or return it into an acceptable condition. But you're not improving it, you're not improving its capacity or necessarily lengthen its expected age. Otherwise they would be a capital expenditure. So just want you to remember a nice reminder of what that would be. So functionality, basically information, and this is aimed at all buildings, not just heritage buildings, etc. You have to negotiate with your client as to what standard, what level of performance or functionality they expect out of the building, the asset, and it's going to change. The example I've got here is a council-owned swimming pool these came from. So they decided that up here that a swimming pool that the public are using all the time is a functionally focused building, which is the majority of ordinary buildings, to be honest, which their notation is an S3, and that's quite a common notation to use for an S3. But as you can see, if you're looking at, say, a hospital, and especially the operating theatres of a hospital or intensive care ward of a hospital, they would be definitely an S1. They are highly sensitive. And if anything goes wrong with them, imagine if the lighting went out or the air conditioning and filtration went out in an operating theatre during an operation. Critical results, as it says. High quality things, which could be the entrance foyer to a theatre, it could be the atrium and the entrance lobby to an office building, it could be the shopping area of a reasonably good quality shop, or your mall. That would be an S2. That'd be good presentation, and generally to a high quality, because the public see that part of it. Other areas, because we talk about front of stage and back of stage, a common way of describing it. So the front of stage is where the public are, so you want it to look nice and smick and clean, but as soon as you get behind, it's much more basic. So you might find that the back of house in most areas of, say, a theatre could be just ancillary functions. They could be an S4. Yeah, especially if they're just storage. And then when you get to things like, basically you do get to storage sheds or something where the public don't go and very limited staff go there, and they're normally trained for that area, then that could be a minimum safety and compliance. So you're almost mothballing something for an S5. And that would possibly be a demolition as well. But you've got to keep it safe until it's removed, so that's an S5. The swimming pool we looked at, which we actually assessed its condition at slightly better than good. All the elements were assessed independently. The areas, the change rooms, the entrance, the pool, the gardens, all assessed separately, and then the average worked out at a 1.6. Must remember that if you go to an office building and they say it's a 3, that doesn't mean it's all going to be a 3. As I say, the entrance, lobby, atrium, whatever, might be a 2, an S2. The circulation areas on each floor, when you step out the lifts and you walk around, that could possibly be brought down to maybe an S3. The offices might be an S3, but then the storage cupboards and stuff like that could be an S4. So you've got a mixture. So don't make the mistake of thinking you only have one standard for a building. All the different operations and that are worked out. amazing, you're recording, your phone goes off. So that's the functionality, and that's produced by negotiation with your client. Functionality is not the same as condition, although the figures can be the same, but they are completely different matrix. The condition survey, this is where we go and pick up the individual elements. The old recording's got one example presented as a pie chart, but we have a survey condition here where we have everything from an excellent, which is an S1. That's basically, it's been handed over but no one's used the building. So it is just waiting for someone to come in and damage a wall somewhere, which they haven't done. Honestly, I've never actually seen a brand new building that really was an S1. I think the best I got was about an S1.2 or 3, because there were still defects. Good. A lot of people think they want to be good condition if they've got offices and that, where in reality you probably really only want fair. The higher up that survey condition you go, the more expensive your maintenance is going to become to keep it at that level. Of course, we go down to an S5, which is unserviceable, which in the old lecture would have been demolition, I think. In this particular case, on this, it wasn't a very big swimming pool. We assessed here a total of 279 components, and things like the roof is a component, the walls are a component, the windows are a component in totality, not individually. You can go down individually if you want to. So components, and we worked out that things in a condition 1, which is excellent condition, their replacement value at the time of the inspection, which was about 10 years ago, was that. And they didn't need anything doing to them. 2 in good condition, and then 3 in fair condition. Okay, and that's the insurance replacement value of the building, and that's represented here graphically. So very little had been to fair. It was only a few years old, this swimming pool, to be honest. And then from the information, you then can produce your 10-year projection. Commonly it's 5 years, but this client wanted 10 years. Of course, the further ahead you plan, the bigger your crystal ball's got to be, and the more inaccurate it's likely to prove. I mean, there's a lot of these floating around out there now which had all been predicted, and all of a sudden the economy's been ruined by the virus, so anything past now is meaningless and will probably have to be reviewed. But the graphical and the text versions of it there, so you have the years, so there's that first year. So we've got corrective maintenance, preventive maintenance, programmed maintenance, and then there's the statutory, which is very little. It's just that tiny little purple cap on the columns. So there's not a lot of statutory in there, but you see it peaks every now and then. So it looks like in 2016-17 we were beginning to expect a minor intervention, a minor refurb possibly there. And that's all assuming that the use of the building stays the same and doesn't change. This client, we normally break down backlogs and things that need to be done into elements that cost $5,000 or more. This client had a $10,000 limit. So only things over $10,000 he wanted reported, or they wanted reported here. So we've got louvers to be replaced, we've got concrete floors, epoxy finish, that'd be non-slip around the pool most probably, and might well be the concrete within the pool. Can't say without reading the report. Steel structures, probably the portal frame of the swimming pool, that's going to need a bit of touching up and painting because it will corrode. So we go on here, metal line bench, the reception. So the reception desk bench gets a lot of wear and tear with customers all coming into it at the same time. A reminder, no, we've done that. So then we've got the priority, which we use for the works that we find. So you don't just find the work and go, oh, it's a fair condition, it's a 3. You then have to go, well, what priority is that? Is that a critical health and safety issue, or is it a legislative issue, or is it just nice to see issue, or whatever? So we've got priorities 1A down to 4. You can read those quite happily on your own there. 1A is basically something which you really should advise the client of from the inspection site at the time. So they've got a chance to, because it's obviously a very, very high risk of something. And then you come out at the end of it all, you develop a maintenance plan. So as you see, we've got years and years and years, all the years along the top here, and then you've got external, preventative maintenance, blah, 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 programmed. something obviously happens in that year and that year and that year. This is probably correcting stuff that was wearing already, and then you suddenly hit this 5-yearly cycle going on, or something else there. I haven't read the report, so and this goes on for about 20 pages, so there's a lot of it, and it is provided electronically for the client to use. These reports are, well, I don't really know what you can say about these reports really. They normally end up as a doorstop. Now, a couple of things just to consider when you've got doesn't have to be a heritage building, it can be an existing building that's been up for a few years, is things to consider if you're going to reuse or you're going to refurbish it. Now, the old lecture has covered that pretty well actually, he's gone into it pretty well, but there are some minor bits that seem to have slipped through, like the environmental factors and things. So there's something called a triple bottom line assessment that most government departments will now do on their properties. I'm deliberately not going to go into it. I'd like you just to go and research what a triple bottom line assessment is, please. So we're all going to have a look for that. And then these are just the issues to consider when you're confronted with an existing structure building. So it's got to the stage where you're looking at quite a lot of repairs need doing, maybe some alterations need doing, and this could be anything from a 25-year-old tower block to a 100-year-old bank. Aha, there's the bank, you see. You build something, and over the years the neighbourhood, whatever, starts to change a bit. So you've got demographic change. So you might build something that needed people living near it, and it's now just become part of an office CBD, which is empty during the weekends and that. So you wouldn't use the building for something that needs lots of shoppers, maybe. So you've got to look at the demand and supply for that type of building and what the demographics were going to support for it. You then consider the technology. So obviously technology has advanced greatly. And it advances every 5 years. It's completely outstripped what it was previously. So you're looking at the technology because that would have an impact on what you can and can't use the building for. Ooh, someone's got a loud car. Structurally, you need to consider, as I say, structurally. So some uses nowadays require stronger floor loadings, etc., especially if you've got filing cabinets and compactors and large computer equipment and all that sort of stuff. So you need to be aware of the structural changes that may need to be made, especially if you're doing a change of use. You may have to do some changes there. Be aware that the National Construction Code, or the Building Code of Australia, as it was called, they continually develop and change. Remember, they are minimum codes, by the way. So a rule of thumb, and it's a grey area this, but a rule of thumb is if you're going to do more than a 50% refurbishment, and don't ask me how you work that out, it's a whole lecture on its own, you have to comply with the new standards. If you're doing less than a 50%, you've got an argument that you don't have to comply with it. So normally it's a good idea to try and comply with as much as you can within a reasonable economic outlay. Part of those changes would include disability access. Now, they've got the legislation of the NCC, and they've also got the social responsibility element of them. Old buildings will not provide reasonable disability access. You've got to sort of try pushing a large pram with a couple of screaming kids or something around and in buildings and shopping centres, and you really do begin to get a feeling for this. Although that's not the only disability, because there's blindness and other things and hearing and that. So, but it's really the people that are unsure on their feet and those in wheelchairs which need the most structural allowance. The others we normally get by with certain systems that can be put in. So you're looking at making sure there's no, you can get into the building without having to go up too many, without go up any steps, preferably. That there's a lift and all the lift controls are at the right level for someone who's in a wheelchair. You need to make sure that the toilets are provided for disabled use. What tends to happen nowadays is, instead of putting in a couple of ordinary toilets and then putting one disabled toilet in, and it doesn't work quite often because you find out to get into the lobby to the toilets, the toilet door might be nice and wide for a wheelchair and everything, but the door from the public area into the lobby, they've overlooked it and they can't get in. They tend to build accessible toilets as the main toilet anyway nowadays. That's the simplest way to go and do it. Not too bad for men's toilets, a couple of urinals and a nice cubicle. Women, where they all need cubicles, it maybe doesn't work too well because of the space demands of big cubicles into the small ones. We've all seen the queues of women in shopping centres and at theatres at half time and things. Then you've got to look at the availability of heritage materials and the tradespeople capable of doing it. There's two problems: cost and cost, because they're in demand or there's a shortage of materials. They could charge a lot more for what they do, so you've got to allow for that inflationary effect on dealing with heritage materials and buildings that you have to do. Heritage controls themselves, the council will have things that they allow and don't allow, state government has things they allow, they don't allow. You get as far as federal. You may be in a conservation area which will control things like the signage you can put in. You need to look at all these things, and that would be another part of the plan that supports the strategic asset management plan there. Environmental improvements for older buildings are really difficult. What can I say really? I mean, it's all right to insulate roofs and things, and you can double glaze existing window frames if you're in a really old building and you've got timber vertical sliding sash windows. As long as you re-weight them to allow for the extra weight of the glass, you can put double glazed panes in those normally, unless we hope there's no original glass in there. So you can do those. Insulating walls and that, because they're normally solid load-bearing walls, can be difficult. You won't be able to cover them on the outside in most situations, like the bank's got a stone frontage, you can't cover that with insulation. More, you'll probably have to insulate internally. Go back to the disabled access, I forgot about providing, if you're multi-storey, providing lifts. I did mention lift controls. Older buildings may not have a lift, but you might be able to reconfigure it internally to put a lift on the back of the building, so as a freestanding lift shaft that just enters in through possibly windows that have been converted into door openings. Environmental improvements, so you would put in energy efficient devices and lighting and low water usage, all that sort of stuff. And then you're looking at introducing modern services into the building. I had the argument with Brisbane City Council about Brisbane City Hall, that I said they couldn't compete with other conference venues because all their main areas were not air conditioned. And said we should put air conditioning in, and their heritage architect said no, you can't do it, damage the building. And I said rubbish, you've got a light well in the middle, you can bring all the ductwork up in the light well and just bring it into the rooms that way, and then if you ever wanted to remove it, you could take it all away and it wouldn't be damaging the building. It's reversible. So, and you've got electronics and power, there's loads of things you need. So you've got to consider all of those as well, okay? So this plus the old lecture plus the notes should be enough for the lecture. I'm just going to do the other one and upload it. Don't forget you've got your rest week coming up soon. Well, not your rest week because you'll be busy, but there won't be any lectures or tutorials for those 2 weeks. I'll see you all next week. So thank you very much.